What's up, guys? Back with another one. I got a good video I had planned for today. I seen a video by the brother from Middle Nation. I think his name is Shaheed Bolson. Makes really good content, and I think he's a pretty fair dude. One video he was making, I agree with a lot of different points he make, but I remember one video he made where he was arguing about the lack of morality in the West. Now he said it was due to religions and people being agnostic and atheists and things of that nature. And I gave him a little pushback. He's a Muslim, and I gave him a little pushback. I reminded him of atrocities committed by the Arabs in the name of Islam. For instance, Songhai, atrocities against the Egyptians and people in the Levant, which they conquered, Ghana. And to be fair, he went back and forth with me a little bit, but then to be fair, in his next video, he addressed the atrocities by Arab Muslims, and I appreciated it and I respect it. So I think he's a fair dude, and I think he makes a lot of valid points. But I do have a little bit of critique about his point of view. So I agree with a lot of things he said. I seen about half of this video. I didn't see the full video, but I'm gonna play portion of him, and then I'm gonna jump in into a video by Henrik Clarke. I think it's like epitomizes uh, his worldview clearly, and it kind of negates it a bit. So yeah, I want to jump into that, but let's jump into the video. I'm gonna pause it at certain points, throw my 2 cents in, and get to the video. John Henrik Clarke. This video might be a little bit long. I don't know how long this is gonna be. Hopefully, you guys stay engaged and watch it, because I think this is really important and interesting. Um, and people remember, this is history. History happened. There's nothing we can do about it. You know what I mean? A lot of people feel like you know we want the circumstances of today to be different, but in a certain sense, I feel like everything happens for a reason. Um, my religions, I don't fall in line with the Abrahamic religions. I fall more in line with like Taoist, Buddhist, mix of Epicurean, a little bit of a mix of Nietzschean. I find like that mesh epitomizes my spiritual beliefs perfectly. So I believe everything happened for a reason. For instance, I'm a person of Puerto Rican descent. I probably wouldn't be here, if the Europeans then colonized the Americas and the indigenous people, some of my ancestors. I wouldn't be here today, if that didn't happen. I'm not saying that was a good thing that happened, but just in reality, I would not exist if that didn't happen. So, I say that to say history, it happened, and it led to where we are today, and how we look at it, how we look and observe, the decisions in today, because I think right now is a very, very critical time. It's going to be looked at as a very critical time in history. I feel like something is on the brink, and I know a lot of people feel it. It's a lot of corruption and economic collapse in the Western world, globally, to be fair, globally. But specifically as a Westerner, I see it in my nation. Uh, so yeah, let's jump into this video, and like I said, I'm gonna throw some points in along the way.
Hypocrisy is breathtaking. The hypocrisy is breathtaking, honestly. No one is on your side. Understand this. You have to know this. I mean, even those so-called woke celebrities, the pro-Palestinian celebrities, the Mark Ruffalos, the Jon Stewart's, what have you, Billie Eilish, Brad Pitt, whoever else. Are you forgetting the fact that these people are multimillionaires? Are you forgetting that fact? I mean, like Jon Stewart, ranting and raving all of his moral outrage about this or that policy, about Trump, about Israel, about Gaza, what have you. Nobody needs you to shout until you're red in the face. Nobody needs you to crack jokes and to expose injustice and so forth. You're worth over $100 million. We shout and rant and rave. That's what we do. That's what we do, because we're not multimillionaires. We don't have the financial power and the financial influence to purchase policy changes. We don't need a Mark Ruffalo to stand next to us at a protest holding up a sign, getting arrested wearing his keffiyeh. This man has access to tens of millions of dollars. Senators don't cost that much. Congress people don't cost that much. You have a credit limit on your Visa card that you could pay as much as what lobbyists pay out, what they spend. You understand? Put money on the table. That's what you need to do. We don't need tweets from you. We tweet, we protest, we make content and so forth because that's all we can do. Those are the resources that we have, but that's not all that you can do. We don't have the resources that you have, you know, but then we're supposed to be grateful when you use your so-called platform to say something positive, just to say something positive about Palestine. What about using your money, the millions of dollars at your disposal that your platform gives you? Use that money to buy some politicians the same way CEOs do. I mean, I know we're not supposed to criticize or as they say, look a gift horse in the mouth, because maybe we'll alienate these obscenely wealthy celebrities who are lavishly rewarded, you know, for play acting and making jokes. And if they show any sign, small sign of basic human morality, then we're supposed to treat that as very fragile and very brittle because maybe their egos will get bruised, and then they'll abandon their support for Palestine. But I'm saying, what support? What support? We don't need your words. We need your millions. Let's be honest. We have words, us, the normal people. That's what we use. That's what we have, so that's what we use. But you're a multimillionaire, and all you do is say some words like us. So how is that support? That's already withholding support. Be real. That's withholding support. No, I don't think you understand how ugly your society is, really. You don't understand it because you are the propagandized. You're not the propagandists. You're the ones who are indoctrinated. You're the ones who are hypnotized. You're not the hypnotists. You know, you're the one that the trick is being pulled on. You're not the one that's pulling off the tricks. You're the one that the joke is on. You're not the ones who are laughing. So you don't really understand. You're living in a hallucination. Even the ones that you think are on your side are actually from among the same people who are pumping you full of hallucinogens so that you never understand what's going on. You think these people are your allies. But imagine if you're in a fight and your friend doesn't jump in and start swinging, even though they're MMA fighters, they just hang back and tell the crowd, you know, that's my best friend in there. Well, that's not your friend, that's not your ally, and that's not support. If you took together like the top 10 so-called, you know, woke or pro-Palestinian celebrities, you could have a combined pool of money over $1 billion. Over $1 billion. I mean, Mr. Pro-Palestine himself, Roger Waters, has a net worth of around $300 million. Are you telling me that these millionaires, these show business millionaires, can't think of a way to use their wealth and their influence to influence policy the way that every other millionaire in America can figure out? Everyone else knows how to do that.
I agree with him 1,000%. I think probably the reason, even though to be fair, you know, they do, you know, something specific. I know like Brad Pitt, Joaquin Phoenix, they just worked on that film about the little girl in Palestine who got killed by the IDF that was trapped in a car with her family for a couple of days, and they just slaughtered her. They knew the emergency services of well, I think they came from the West Bank. They coordinated with the IDF and they killed them too, and then killed the little girl. Just like complete barbarity. You know, I went into the whole Palestinian, Israeli-Palestinian numerous amounts of times. Those are European settler. The Israelis are European settler colonialists, and they are the pure definition of a terrorist. Like I don't know, you know. I guess they just look at Hamas and you know, the PLO and all the different resistance factions, you know, as terrorists because they got AKs and sandals. But I mean, if you look at the definition of terrorists, it is the Israelis by far. By far, they are not native of that land. They're from Europe. They are religious converts, and I hate that we kind of take them with a whole religion. But I spoke about that before, and I can make a separate video on that again. But you know, I think that you know, people fear losing residual wealth coming in. You know, they might have a whole bunch of millions, but inflation is high. I don't know. Fucking, I don't know, man. You know. I do agree with you though. I think Shahid, I think, you know, people got to make a moral stand, and you know sometimes it's gonna cost you something, you know, to do the right thing. But it's always the right time to do the right thing. Uh,
No, nobody is on your side, and it's horrendous. You see, you've been fed a narrative about morality, about virtue, about values, and many of you believe it. Many of you believe that narrative, and you actually do prize those values, but you'll never see them actualized in your society, never. You'll only see them talked about, you'll see them given lip service, and you'll be gaslighted on the basis of the values that they fed you. That's how it works. That's all. That's what they're for. They're narrative devices, devices of social control. Your heroes are on the villain's side, I hate to tell you, and they're playing you for fools. And the values that you have been taught were only taught to you so that they could fool you with them. It's like if you teach your kids to trust only those adults who wear a certain badge or a certain uniform or what have you, and then the predators start to wear those badges and those uniforms. For them, the moral talk is just like teaching you code words. Teaching your child a code word, for example. Whoever says this, you can trust them. So now the enemy has an easy way to win your trust. Just use the code word. See, that's what indoctrination is. It means that you have been made to believe in a version of the world that's not real. Because if it was real, then you wouldn't have to be indoctrinated. If it was real, then the propaganda wouldn't be necessary. And that means that the reality that's being hidden from you is something that you would not accept if you knew it. It means that things are going on that are not in your interests, but are in the interests of the people who are spreading the narrative, who control the narrative that you are fed about reality. Do you understand? It means that by definition, things are wildly different than you think in the world that you live in. And I've talked about this many, many times. Some people are triggered by what I say and they accuse me of hating the West. They accuse me of being divisive or what have you. But look, if the truth is hateful to you, or if you think that someone telling you the truth hates you because they're telling you the truth, why do you think that the one who's been lying to you loves you? The fact of the matter is that the West, the collective West, Western Europe and America, have an absolutely grotesque history. And it doesn't matter what level of society you're even talking about, or what aspect of the so-called civilization that you're talking about. I mean, don't get mad at me for what I'm saying. Get mad about having been lied to about it. That's what you should get mad about. I mean, do you know when the Europeans came to the Muslim world during the Crusades? Subhanallah, they had literally in their lives never met people before who actually were even hygienic, who even washed every day, who bathed regularly, who washed their hands before they ate, who brushed their teeth, who had basic sanitation systems in their societies, in their cities. That was the first time they encountered civilized people. And you know what those Christian crusaders did? Those holy warriors of Christendom? They straight up ate people, boiled human beings. Muslims in pots. They roasted children on spits. That's what they did. And we know that there are numerous incidents of African slaves being cannibalized on the ships, on the boats, and once they got there. And everyone knows by now how Europe practiced what they called medical cannibalism, where they would consume mummified flesh and drink blood because they thought it was good for their health. This is where you come from. They would publicly execute criminals, and then pass blood around the crowd from that criminal for the people to drink. And you don't want to hear about how filthy and how degenerate their monarchs were, their aristocracy were all across Europe. The rich and powerful, how they were infested with lice and parasites, how they defecated where they stood, how diseased and how cruel and how perverted and how syphilitic they were. Henry VIII, Ferdinand VII of Spain, Leopold of Belgium. I mean, it's a through line. It's a through line from Caligula right up to Biden, right up to Trump, right up to Macron until now. Under the powdered wigs and the fancy clothes, there was rot, opulence, and putrescence side by side throughout all of European history. And no, it's not just the aristocracy. No, it's not just the rich. Don't kid yourself. Like I said, we're talking about every level and every aspect of that society. Your doctors were going from performing autopsies to delivering babies without cleaning their instruments, without washing their hands. I mean, when it was even suggested to them that doctors maybe should, and surgeons should wash their hands and should practice basic hygiene as late as the 1840s, the people who suggested that were mocked. Well, you didn't start washing your hands until the 20th century. Do you understand me? Meanwhile, Muslim physicians had been sanitizing for 1,000 years already. In Europe, they would hurl excrement from their windows into the street, literally dumping filth on the people's heads. You had to legislate that to make them stop. You didn't have the basic moral sense and the decency to just not do that. You literally had to be forced by law to stop doing it. The River Thames in London was a moving cesspit. You didn't even build sewers until the 1850s. Meanwhile, Muslims had underground water disposal pipelines for centuries. I'm not saying that you weren't smart enough to do it. I'm saying it wasn't a priority for you. You didn't even think it was important to not have filth in your city. You know that in Paris, in the city of Paris, the morgue used to display bodies behind glass as a sort of a civic attraction. These people are macabre and brutal. This is a macabre and brutal people. I'm telling you, you have to understand the history here. You have to understand the history because it hasn't stopped. Just look at the forced starvation in Gaza, sponsored by the United States of America. Well, this isn't the first time. From the engineered famine against the Irish by the British, the potato famine so-called, to the Germans in East Africa, they starved those people too. They burned their crops, they seized their food. Entire regions were forced into starvation as policy. Same in India in 1943 in Bengal. In Kenya in the 1950s, you had detention camps, you had forced labor, you had torture, you had castration, you had sexual assault, all systematic. You know, France fired nuclear devices in the Algerian desert, and they buried contaminated waste under the sand. As savage as you were to people overseas, you were just as bad to your own. Like I said, in Ireland, you had those mother and baby homes, the Magdalene laundries by the Catholic Church that were nothing but sadistic torture chambers. That operated deep into the 20th century. The State Commission in Ireland counted thousands of child deaths at those facilities. Those laundries were nothing but forced labor camps. Then, of course, you had the eugenics boards that sterilized tens of thousands of people under legal cover in Scandinavia for decades. In the United States, all across the West, this was going on. You had
Came out recently that they was putting some bullshit radioactive zinc in black communities in St. Louis, and a whole bunch of people died there of cancer, and you got the the Tuskegee experiments. Well, they have done a whole bunch of degenerate shit here in America as far as eugenics and chemical testing and shit like that without the knowledge, without people having the knowledge of it.
human zoos, lynchings, rape, torture, murder, mutilation, and cannibalism. See, when I talk about this, you're going to feel like I'm talking about some other society. It's going to feel like I'm talking about some other people, some other primitive, backward, savage people. That's how it will sound to you, that I can't possibly be talking about your own people, because these are all things that you accuse everyone else of being. But in fact, there is no one with a more disgraceful and more degenerate history than the one that you won't teach, because it's your own. You won't teach your own history, and that's a shame. It's a shame because people have a right to know. People need to know what they're dealing with. I mean, your own people need to know that. Your own people need to know what they're dealing with, because the society that they live in is not the society that they were told they live in. I keep telling you, Epstein was not one bad apple. Diddy wasn't. Trump isn't. The truth is that whole barrel is spoiled. The whole barrel is rotten. So what chance does a good apple have in that rotten barrel? Even if you are still insisting to call the continuous record of uninterrupted wrongdoing, uninterrupted sickness, evil, and cruelty, even if you insist on calling that an alarming number of isolated incidents that just keep happening again and again and again at the systemic level, at the institutional level, at the collective level, at the societal level, at the community level, and at the individual level, over and over and over again, without pause, without fail. I'm asking, where is there any evidence of good apples in that rotten barrel? This is a lot that you have to wrap your heads around. I understand that. And it's really just the first level of understanding. It's really just the first level of recognition. The first level is recognizing that, yes, we are not talking about isolated incidents. We are not talking about a few bad apples. We are talking about a so-called civilization that has always been primitive, that has always been brutal, that has always been twisted, and that never changed, that never evolved. And that's why they don't teach you about their history honestly. That's why they have to propagandize you and miseducate you, and why they have to pretend to be shocked. They have to pretend to be shocked by the Diddy's and the Epsteins and so forth. Why they pretend to be appalled, precisely to cover up how actually standard this behavior is and always has been in that society. Everything that Diddy was doing is being done right now. Everything that Epstein was doing is being done right now. Good Lord, even what Hitler was doing is being done right now. Even what Leopold did is going on right now. Like I said, it's just a code they use, a hypnotic suggestion when they tell you that there were a few bad apples. When they tell you it's a few bad apples, then you will assume that the rest of the barrel is good, but it's not good. It's diseased. That's just the first level of realization. That's the first level of recognition that you have to come around to. A lot of Westerners will get so triggered and so defensive about this that they won't even be able to accept this layer of reality, much less the next layer of reality, because the next layer is even harder to reconcile yourself with if you're a Westerner. The next layer is realizing that there is no escaping the consequences of your history, and realizing that those consequences are, in fact, being imposed upon you right now, especially in America, but in Europe too. I mean, look at Europe. It's falling apart. Europe is falling apart. They're going extinct, and even their own natural extinction isn't fast enough for them. They're rushing towards war and conflict on the continent. Macron just told hospitals in France that they need to be ready for a European war by next year. War with Russia. They're tearing their own societies apart. They're impoverishing themselves. They're enslaving themselves. They're deindustrializing themselves. They're being asset stripped. Exactly what they did to the people that they colonized. Europe is tumbling into the abyss of their own making. But America, the imperial heir of Europe, the neoliberal economic firing squad of corporate power, they used to spray their bullets like a mass shooter all across the global south, all across the Muslim world, all across Africa, all across so-called Latin America. Well, America is descending into madness. You're descending into madness because you're cursed. That's why I've said you cannot properly analyze geopolitics. You cannot properly analyze geopolitics if you exclude the reality of divine justice. You cannot exclude God from your assessments. You can't exclude Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from your forecasts. And you cannot be...
I agreed with him the first 15 minutes. They ain't go off into the religious, tangent. And I think it's important to remember, Islam was the last Abrahamic religion to pop up. All right. The first is Abrahamic religion to pop up, Judaism. And let's not confute it, the ancient people of the Levantine with the Jewish Europeans in Israel now. Let's not, conflate them. Two different groups of people, right? But the original people, the ancient Canaanites, so to say, where did they get their Ten Commandments from? Where did they get the basis of their religion from? Right? From Egypt, from out of Africa, right? The 42 negative confessions. The 10 of the 10 commandments are literally stripped from the 42 negative confessions. Literally. You know what I'm saying? So it's an important thing to realize. But let's jump into Dr. Clarke. I think he does a masterclass and specifically addresses the point that Shaheed Bosan was about to make, the argument he was about to make. I think this, refutes it at its core. So I'm gonna jump in, play this, and then I'm gonna throw a couple opinions in as it plays.
And Islam, and bring them back to fore, bring them back into world consideration, and understand that Islam came into being so fast. It is literally a religion made from a composite religion, and the least original of the world's religions. It had to take something from Christianity, something from Judaism, something from Zoroastrianism. That is nothing that one needs to apologize for. And yet, it came into being at a time. It served a great purpose. And it had to turn to many places for haven and for shelter. On the advice of Zayd bin Harith and Bilal, some of the key followers were sent to Ethiopia for shelter while the trouble in Arabia blew over. The prophet said, "Go to Ethiopia, go to that land of righteousness where no one is wrong." This is the kind of reputation Ethiopia had among Muslims at the time. It had been a Christian nation for over 300 years. Other people against the move went ahead and told the Ethiopians that these people were thieves. And when the Ethiopian king received them, he said that your message is not much different from the Christian message. And he received them and sheltered them until the difficulty blew over and they went by and strengthened and got the faith well underway. Now, Bilal stayed with the prophet the rest of his life, and when the prophet was dying, he literally appointed Bilal as the next caliph, and he refused it. Now look what would have happened to the faith had Bilal became the next caliph after the prophet. It would have been a different religion altogether. But he refused the honor, but he did not call the prayers except 2 more times. After that, he called the prayers for Umar, the first caliph, and 1 time for a special meeting for the first caliph. And then he either went back to Ethiopia or he died. We know Zayd bin Harith died in a battle against the Byzantines. But these 2 Ethiopians had helped to lay the foundation and the strength for Islam. Islam now was ready to move out of Arabia over into North Africa, to move into the vacuum left by the confusion of the Romans and the mismanagement of Christianity. North Africa was in such a sad state that the people were ready to welcome almost anything with the wreckage left by the Romans. So there was very little resistance.
Just you understand the premise of what was happening at the time you're talking about. Uh, during the Egyptian dynasties lasted, I believe, longer than any other empire or kingdom. It literally lasted for thousands of years. We talking about late, what would it be, 3000 BC, or like 4000 BC, like in between 4000 and 3000 BC, the dynastical periods. There was already civilization up and down to now, pre-dynastical, but many started the first dynastical period in Egypt, and in in the 2000 BCs, you had the pyramids that was created. You had pyramids up and down and now, all the way down to Ethiopia and the Sudan, Somalia. But once the first invaders came, I think it was the 16th dynasty with the Hyksos. But then they got kicked out, and those are the people believed to be the ancient Canaanites. the ancient people of the Levant. Once they got kicked out, they believed to have went to the Levant and created their civilization there. That's what a lot of scholars believe. It hasn't been fully proven yet, but because something with the term shepherd herders or something, you can look it up on your own. But you had Cyrus the Great and the Persian invasions. I think what was it around 600 BC, and the Persians were pretty brutal to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians, I made videos talking about this as well. The Egyptians that's there now, I'm about to get into it now anyway. The ancient Egyptians, so the Persians were pretty brutal to the ancient Egyptians. So Alexander the Great came and conquered. That's when he beat what was his name? Not Cyrus. It's name slipped on me right now, but he went conquered a lot of the known world, conquered the Persian Empire. He made it all the way to India, and the Egyptians welcomed him in. They welcomed him in. They even made him a pharaoh. That's when Alexandria was created. So, but once he died, you had the wars of the Diadochi. Ptolemy laid claim to Egypt, and his dynasty ruled there for the next couple hundred years, I would say, until the times of Julius Caesar. So for about 250 years, 250 years or so. Then you had the fall when the Romans completely controlled it. Once the Civil War happened with Octavian and Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and then so the Romans controlled it, and then once the Western Roman Empire fell in the late 400s, the Eastern Roman Empire still stood, which was the Byzantine Empire. They had separated, they had split because the empire was so mass that they decided they needed two different emperors to control, their separate regions. Later, Justinian had Belisarius winning and reconquered Latinum. I think was it from the Visigoths or the Ostrogoths, Vandals, one of them, the Lombards, one of them. But they ended up realizing it wasn't even worth it for the resources and that it was costing them and what they was bringing. It wasn't even worth it. But so they kept the Eastern Empire. Then you had the Arab uprising, and you had in 620s or 630s the Arab invasion into the Levant and Egypt, and they conquered it. So he's talking specifically about that time. I just want to try to give a little quick background about what's going on in that period of history, from the decline of the ancient Egyptians to all the different subsets of group of people that's came to be there now, specifically the Arabs. But you had a mix of Greeks, Persians, Arabs that all controlled that land for, I want to say, what, about 1,000 years.
In a little while, the Muslim armies had swept across most of North.
But by that time, all the pyramids and all the Temple of Luxor, all the different beautiful creates, the Sphinx, so that was already created by the Africans way before that. This is this stuff is after the invasion of the Sea People and the Bronze Age collapse. All this different things happen. So as far as the conquerors,
Northern Africa, a little resistance from the Berbers. These are relatives of the Arabs who had arrived much earlier. And this resistance didn't last too long. When this resistance died down, Islam swept into the Western Sudan and began to convert Africans. Now, Islam swept into the Western Sudan. Understand me now, if you can visualize a map of Africa. They went down into West Africa, not the coast, but inland away from the coast. That is called the Western Sudan, skirting the coast. And they converted a group of Africans. And these Africans became purists. so much purists that these Africans, after 50 years or so, came back into Morocco and told those who converted them, you are not properly observing the faith. I'm purer than you are. Now, you have to understand this, because Western Africa, the Western Sudan and Western Africa were converted by Islamized blacks. East Africa was converted by Arabs. Islamized blacks knew what part of African culture to leave intact in spite of Islam. You can see the difference to this day. And East Africa, converted by the Arabs, who had no respect for African culture then or now, they destroyed a lot of African culture. They married African women, and after 50 years, they had produced enough black-looking Arabs, and ultimately they would use them to go inland where the Arabs were not permitted to go and start the East African slave trade. Over 600 years before the European slave trade. And the Arab is the only aspect, a branch of Islam to use Islam as an aspect of slavery. Now, the Africans who converted those in Western Sudan left the matrilineal system intact, meaning the lineage coming down through the female remained intact in Western Africa, while in Eastern Africa, the Arab installed the patrilineal system, meaning the inheritance comes through the oldest son, and the lineage comes down through the male side of the family. It has wrecked the culture to this very day. It has confused the culture to this very day. Now, when they arrived in Egypt, they arrived at a culture that had been raped by foreigners for 1,000 years. They had no respect for it or understanding of it then. They have no respect for it or understanding for it now. The Arab traditionally has no respect for non-Arabic culture.
I agree with Professor Clarke there. If you look at Zawi Hawass, the guy, what is it, the head of archaeology in Egypt, he's a piece of shit. He's a complete fucking scumbag. Yeah, at first he was trying to argue that the ancient Egyptians wasn't African. Then it got to a point he couldn't argue it no more. He said, yeah, they was African, but they literally, this is what he said, but they're not nigga. They weren't nigga. They weren't Negroid. You fucking idiot. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. People of African descent are the most diverse, the genetically diverse people. All of humanity come from Africans, whether from Arabs, Europeans, to the people in China, in fucking Korea. They came from the Khoisan people. Come on, man. So that guy's a piece of shit. But, you know, let's keep playing this.
And practically none for African culture in other parts of Africa. And this is the basic drawback and the basic difference between Arabs spreading Islam and Africans spreading Islam. African Islam is basically different from Arab Islam. Arab Islam is a form of Arab supremacy and condescension. Just like white Christianity is a form of white condescension. They think they're doing you a favor to let you in their church. The church becomes their private property, just like the Arabs think they're doing you a favor when you come into one of the mosques. And if you go to Mecca and see the discrimination against colors, different colors, you will find that out, is that even in Mecca, there is color discrimination. And they'll look you straight in the eye and deny the whole thing. All right, now, They're in Egypt. But out of the Western Sudan would come a great general, Tarak Ben Zad, or Jabral Tarak. He would discover a weakness in Spain fighting the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals fighting among themselves. The dissident element in Spain would do something white people rarely ever do. They would sneak across into Africa and tell the Africans how weak the whites are, and said they are so weak, if you want to conquer them, it's an easy thing to do. Jabral would send a testing army, about 10,000, just to test their lines. You find it is easy. Then later, he would send 60,000. He'd take Spain. Now this is purely an African conquest. You are not dealing with the Arab conquest of Spain at first, because the Arabs were not there at first. The initial conquest of Spain was African, not Arab. That army came from the Senegamia, now Senegal, and parts of what is now Mauritania. And when they moved over and conquered Spain, Madame Bagiba has written a book on it that bears the name Tarak Ben Zad. The Rock of Gibraltar is named after him. It's the hill or the mountain of Tarak. Gibraltar is a corruption of his name, Jabral. And she describes the army going into Spain. She says the army was black as ink. The general was blacker still. Meaning the general was the only one riding a white horse. So his blackness against that whiteness looked blacker than the rest of them. But the horse was better dressed than the kings of Europe, with silk and brocade. And the women taking off garments and throwing him in front of his horse, waving. Let me be the first. I'd like to see Hollywood put this in Technicolor. Militarily, the Africans took over Spain, and militarily, the Africans held Spain until 1240, while the Arabs did come in. But the military hold on Spain was Africa. Now let's look at the Africans and the Arabs, that combination called Moors in Spain. What did they do? What did the Africans give to Islam? Why do you find a toleration between Christians and Arab, Christians and Muslims in Spain that never existed before ever? It is the African spirituality. They coexisted with the Catholic Church side by side. They worked out a humane agreement. No mass killing. They built public schools. They built public baths. There's a chapter in John Jackson's Introduction to African Civilization called Africa and the Civilizing of Europe. You would do well to read it. That chapter alone is worth the price of the book. But there are many other books on the Africans and the Arabs in Spain. They gave Spain the greatest civilization it has known before or since. They built a great university, Salamanca. They translated the great works of the masters of Europe, including a lot of work they had stolen from Africa. Europe had forgotten its own masters. The Africans translated it. It was the African that suggested that the Jews be appointed to the chairs in the mind sciences. God, what an error. All the ideology chairs. It was the Africans who took the Jews into Spain and made them the grandees, the money managers of Spain. And when the Africans lost power, some of them went Holland and found the Dutch East India and the Dutch West India Company and became managers of the slave trade. People find no compunctions of turning on us when it's to their convenience to do so. But their performance in the partnership between the Africans and the Arabs and the Berbers in Spain was a long and beneficial partnership and a fine moment in their history and in world history. The African and the Arab and Islam had united and held Europe at bay for almost 1,000 years. And when that partnership went bad, both of them were in trouble. By 1450, the Africans and the Arabs began to argue among themselves over nonsense at first. But 1240, the Portuguese had broken away from the Africans, but Spain was still under their domination. Then half of Spain, by 1455, had broken away, the Castilian part. And now they had colonial aspiration of their own. And they went to the Pope to discuss the matter. He was the leading authority of the world where Europe is concerned. Now they wanted a piece of the world. They wanted to start dividing up the world among themselves. And the Pope told them, you are both authorized to reduce to servitude all infidel people. In other words, you need not feel guilty about the slave trade that had already started along the coast.
Pope Martin V, the Spanish Inquisition. I made a point in one of my last videos talking about Europeans using religion as a political tool. And to be fair, the Arabs as well. But that's one instance of it. Another instance for Europeans is right now in Gaza, the European settler colonialists using the Hebrew faith as a clutching the term anti-Semitic and trying to say that they're indigenous to the land, which is complete bullshit. But something that happens often. People using religion as a political tool.
Of West Africa. The fact that there were great independent states inside of Africa is something I'll talk about later on. My main point here is that Islam had swept down into the Western Sudan. That a lot of people say the great states of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai were Muslim states. Ghana was never a Muslim state. In fact, Ghana was destroyed by Muslims. By Abu Bakr of the Susus. When he pulled his army out of Ghana to help his co-religionists in Spain, he died. Now, I'll be talking about these other states in more detail in another way. But what I'm concluding with is that the spread of Islam into the Western Sudan had brought a language, a sense of accounting, and a religion that had a fascination for the African. But now, the argument between the Africans and the Arabs, spoiling the performance they had, that almost 1,000-year performance that had been good not only for them but good for mankind. They had given North Africa some stability, and they had given the Western Sudan some stability. It came 1492, and the least significant event would be the so-called discovery of the New World. The greatest event in the history of that period would be really the Africans and the Arabs, collectively called Moors, would lose their hold on Spain and be pushed out. Be pushed out of Spain, and they would lose the Mediterranean. They had blocked Europe in the Mediterranean. They had forced Europe out of the Mediterranean, and they had forced Europe into the Middle Ages. Now Europe had discovered longitude and latitude. It had come out of its box. They'd gone back to sea. They had learned some maritime techniques from the school at Salamanca, that the Africans had translated information from Spain, and they would turn on the very Africans who translated it for them and the very Arabs. The fight between the Africans and the Arabs would facilitate the rise of Europe. But except had the Africans and the Arabs got together at this point in history, fighting over various interpretations of Islam, they could have stopped Europe and stopped the slave trade, but instead of stopping the slave trade, the Arabs went into the slave trade, disgraced Islam, disgraced themselves, and left the African without protection, something which we should never forgive. And after this, the Africans, mixed Africans, Berbers, and Arabs in Morocco, sore heads, turned inward on Africa to rob the nations to the south. They recruited European mercenaries with modern weapons for that day, and with some guns supplied by Queen Elizabeth I, they invaded the Western Sudan, destroyed the great state of Songhai in the long night that was to last 500 years had started, and the good that Islam had done was being spoiled. Now you had Muslim against Muslim facilitating the spread of the slave trade inland. I am saying that while this is one of the world's greatest religions, its redemption is going to come from Africans who will rescue it, give it a real meaning, make it a world religion, make it a world force for unity, and give it the sense of tolerance and respect for other cultures and religions that it once had, and integrate it into the concept of African culture and African liberation. Either do this or throw it into the ash can of history. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I think he had the core precisely. Yeah, but I'm gonna cut it here. I hope you got the point. that I was trying to express through the words of Dr. Henrik Clarke. I threw my little 2 cents in there, here and there, but I hope if you watch this fully and thoroughly, you understood the point of the message that I was trying to convey, and that Dr. Clarke conveyed perfectly. But if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe. I haven't asked anybody to do it yet, but I enjoy making this content. I enjoy the comment section. I had a couple videos where people become a little hostile. I don't mind. Say you speak your mind. You want to be disrespectful. Hopefully it's a positive comment, even if it's feedback. Even if you disagree with me on certain points, I don't mind. But if you want to be disrespectful, I can be disrespectful too. I don't mind. I find it entertaining. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully if you watch and you enjoyed the content, you learned something. Because we can always you can always learn every day, and I'm not any different. I learn new things every day, and that's the beautiful thing about life. I would say. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Enjoy it. Enjoy your days. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon.